This tutorial will show you how to paint the blue lightning storm. Check the materials section for all the materials that you'll need for this painting. I'm going to first draw the horizon line. So most of this painting is sky and mountain and trees, and we only have a little bit of water on the bottom. The horizon line is about 2 fingers from the bottom, and I drew that with a straight edge. Next, we're going to paint the sky. The sky background in this painting is a like a pouring down rain. Imagine when you look at a thunderstorm and it's pouring down rain. We have the verga that shows from the rain, and it's going to be these 3 colors in this painting. So I triple loaded my 3/4 inch flat brush in those 3 colors. So we have the cobalt blue, we have the ultramarine blue, the titanium white, and the turquoise blue. Okay, so my 3/4 inch flat brush is loaded in all 3 of those colors, and I'm going to paint in a sort of diagonal fashion, but imagine how this downdraft would look. It would appear to be diagonal, but it might be kind of curving a little bit. Imagine if the wind was pushing that rain and it's kind of swerving to the right a little bit. Okay, so as I fill this canvas up, I'm going to have the colors blend, but I'm not going to over blend, because if I over blend, then it's all going to turn into the same color, and that won't be very interesting. So yes, I want to blend it. I don't want it to look too streaky, but I also don't want it to all be the same color. Okay, so you're just going to have to find a gentle balance between over blending and not over blending. Okay, so I recommend that you add a little bit more white than the other 2 colors, just because that white will help the other colors blend and make them lighten up. And then you'll see that there's a few streaks of white in there that give it some kind of interest, because there's going to be lightning in the sky and there will be some bright areas in the sky. But I'm not worried about where my lightning is going to show at this point. I'm just filling the entire sky area with these 3 colors. And you can see me loading more titanium white because I'm using a lot more titanium white than the other colors here. Okay. I'm not going below the horizon line, and I'm also leaving a little bit of a gap on the bottom. There's a white spot above the horizon line that I'm not painting on, because that's where my mountain's going to be. Okay, so my video is showing you now that I have a new little spot of the dark blue on my palette, the ultramarine blue, and I'm sorry, not the ultramarine blue, the turquoise blue. I need to get my colors straight here. So the turquoise blue, and I'm going to paint the bottom part. This is the water, so I'm just doing a solid left and right stroke. I'm painting just the bottom part under the horizon line. I'm not worrying about reflections or anything. This is just the base layer of the water. Okay, so I'm just painting that in, and I can paint the sides as well as I'm doing this. So that's a stretched canvas. I can paint the sides. All right, so that's my first layer of the turquoise, and that's the water. Okay, and then I'm going to jump to the mountains. Okay, and so the mountains are ultramarine blue, and I switched to a bright brush. So my mountain's going to start up about 4 or 5 fingers on the left, and I'm going to use the tip of my brush to kind of form the mountain shape. So it kind of dips down, but then it kind of curves up a little bit. Okay, and then I'm basically going to fill in the mountain with that color. So this is a solid coat of ultramarine blue with the 12 flat brush, and I'm just filling that in. And I guess my stroke, I'm using the full width of the brush, and my strokes are kind of going the direction of that initial line that I painted with the mountain. And they might eventually go completely straight as I get to the bottom where that horizon line is and where the blue meets the turquoise. So you want to paint all the way down to that turquoise and try to keep your line as straight as possible. So try not to paint over the turquoise. Okay. And then, so this mountain is now a solid ultramarine blue, and I'm going to add a little bit more texture and dimension, and it's very basic. I still have titanium white on my palette, so that's what I did. I dipped my brush without rinsing. I dipped the tip in the titanium white, and I'm just going to kind of form some boundaries with this mountain. So this mountain, maybe there's a mountain in the front, so I kind of painted this diagonal line to define that mountain, and I'm just blending it back into the blue. Okay, so same right here. I kind of defined that mountain, the top part, the highlight on the very top, and then I'm just blending it back with the blue. Okay, and then I'm just going to blend that just a bit right there. And then maybe there's a bit of texture in the mountain, so I'm kind of painting sort of these wavy sort of strokes within the mountain. Okay. So next I loaded my palette with Mars Black, and I have a very dark shadowy area on the mountain, on the lower right part of the mountain. And so this Mars Black, I dipped the tip of the brush in the Mars Black, and I'm very gently blending that Mars Black in because black takes over so fast. It's a very strong color. So I want to be very careful just to kind of gently blend that into the blue so it transitions nicely. So we have a dark shadowy area on the lower right part of the mountain. And so now our mountain has some tints and shades in it. Instead of it being solid blue, we see some different areas in there and some darks and lights. Okay, so I'm just going back in. I'm going to maybe add a little bit more white over here and blend it back in. And you could really get in there and do some more detail work in the mountains and do some more blending and do that. But I kept the mountains pretty simple in this, because they weren't really the focus of the painting. The focus of this painting is the lightning. Okay, so I'm going to rinse my brush off here, and I'm going to do the reflection in the water. So this is the 12 flat and dipped in the titanium white, and the turquoise is kind of dry right now. It allows that white to show up. So there's a bright reflection right in the middle of the water, because I know my lightning is going to strike right there in the middle on the mountain, and it would cast a really bright reflection on the water. So I'm doing horizontal lines kind of all throughout the water, but I'm really emphasizing those horizontal lines right in the middle, so that's the brightest part of the water. Okay. So rinsing that brush off, and then I'm going to work on the trees. So I'm going to mix turquoise and ultramarine blue together to create this kind of dark turquoise looking color. I believe in the tutorial I said, in the written part of the directions, I said just to use the turquoise, and in the video I'm mixing the two together. So you kind of decide. I think I decided when I painted this that I wanted it to look darker. Okay, so to paint the trees, I'm using the 12 flat and I'm using the tip, and I want that tip to be nice and pointed. And so I'm doing the middle parts of the tree first, so the brush, I'm holding it on its side. Okay, and then to paint the actual branches of the tree, I'm going to start at the top and kind of hold my brush sort of at an angle so I can get the smaller areas, smaller branches at the top, and then I'm going to tap the brush as I work down, and the tree gets fuller and wider on the bottom. So the foliage at the top is more narrow, so it forms a triangle shape, and then it gets wider on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. I'm going to use my brush kind of at an angle to start to get the smaller little branches, and I'm going to tap, tap, tap in a sort of zigzag motion going down to form the tree into a triangle. And so I'm using the flat brush for this. I do have another tutorial about how to paint trees with a fan brush, so if you like to use the fan brush for a little bit more texture in your trees, you can do that. I'm using the flat brush for this painting, so that's what I'm doing. But you can use a fan brush if you like using fan brushes for your trees, and especially for the big tree that we're going to do here. So we have just that the trees in the background are a bluish color because they're kind of in the distance, and the tree that's over here on the lower left is going to be all black, so it's closer to us, it's darker. Okay, so this tree trunk is taller, and I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to go up the canvas a little bit more than halfway up the canvas. And of course, it's really hard to hold your brush very steady to make a perfectly straight line, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Hold the brush at an angle to start, and then just tap the brush. I'm tapping the brush on the tip of the brush, and when you tap the brush as you work down, you go in a zigzag motion and you form the branches of the tree. So they start to get more wider as you work your way down. And then you just keep tapping in and filling it in as you work down. Okay, so just tap, tap, tap all the way down. And then as you get towards the bottom, the branches on the bottom are wider. And then, so you may have to go over it again because it doesn't look as full, and you could always do that. You could always go back on the top of your tree and stamp it again, and then it will fill up your tree even more. So if you keep doing that, it'll add more foliage to it, and make your tree more branchier. Okay, so I'm going to leave my tree like that. And next I'm going to move on to these clouds. So I decided I have a favorite cloud brush now, and this is it's labeled as a number 12 round brush, but I believe it is a lot bigger than what a standard number 12 round brush is, because the radius of this brush is pretty wide compared to another 12 round brush I've seen. So read the description of my materials and I tell you exactly what pack this brush came with. So if you're interested, you can look that up, and I give you some other tips on what you can do. So anyway, the round brush that I'm using, I've dipped it in just Ultramarine Blue, and I'm going to start painting these storm clouds, and I'm going to start at the very top of my canvas. And so this storm cloud way up here is going to go all the way across the canvas. And I'm kind of painting, and you can see I'm moving my brush kind of left and right, but the bottom part of that cloud forms kind of a bumpy shape. So it's not a straight line, it's a bumpy line, and it goes all the way across. Okay, so that's the top shelf of the cloud in the storm. And then I'm going to paint my next cloud, and this cloud is going to be a single cloud, and it's kind of hanging out by itself over here. So I'm going to form the shape, and it's going to be a cumulonimbus cloud, or pretty close to a cumulonimbus cloud. And so it's kind of rounded at the top, and then it's wide at the bottom but kind of flat on the bottom, so you can see that. And I'm just kind of doing these circular strokes to form this cloud. So I'm going to do another one. This one's also by itself. It's not attached to any of the other clouds, and I'm going to do kind of the same thing. It's kind of tall and rounded at the top, And then maybe I'll do 2 bumps at the top, or maybe a kind of a shorter bump over here on the right. And then I will kind of drag it along, and then the bottom part of the cloud is sort of flat but still bumpy on the bottom. Okay, and then I ended up doing a 3rd cloud. I'll show you here in just a second. So I'm just making this cloud over here on the right kind of a little bit more bumpier on the bottom, adding a little bit more paint to it. Okay, so my 3rd cloud is kind of smaller under these 2, kind of flatter, and but it still has the bumpy sort of shape at the top. Okay, so we're going to do some blending with these clouds next, and it's important that our blue stay wet now. So what I'm going to do is, don't take a break, we want that blue to stay wet. We're going to do some wet on wet blending. I wipe the blue off my brush, and then I dip the tip in white. Okay, so I'm going to do the highlights of these clouds, and the highlight's going to be on the bottom of the cloud, because the lightning is striking from the bottom of the cloud, and that's where it would be bright. Okay, so I just added the white to the bottom, and then I'm going to blend it back up into the cloud. And when I'm blending it back up into the cloud, I'm painting in these little circular strokes. And what happens when you do the little circular strokes is, okay, so that white is blending with the blue, and if we get this kind of fluffy texture, because that white is showing up fluffy in the dark blue area, and it's blending, and we want to kind of do the best we can to blend that white line back into the cloud, so it's not just a white line on at the bottom of a cloud. Okay, so we start with the white line on the bottom. So this is just the white, and I'm just going to blend it back up into the blue by painting in these sort of clockwise, counterclockwise direction, and it's blending back up into the blue, and it's creating the sort of fluffy texture because that white is showing up in areas of the blue. Okay, so I'm dipping the tip of my brush in white again. So there was never any point where I dipped my brush in the water, or when I transitioned from the blue to the white, I didn't dip my brush in the water. I wiped it off with a towel, and that's kind of helpful because there's still some dryish blue on my brush, and it kind of helps with the blending. It's almost like my brush is double loaded at this point with obviously more white on it because I'm just loading my brush in the white. Okay, so I start at the bottom again, and I do little circular strokes to blend it back up into the cloud. And so normally when you do the clouds, the highlights kind of at the top, but this time it's on the bottom. Like I said, it's because of the lightning. The lightning is coming out from the bottom. It's reflecting its light on the bottom of the cloud. Okay, so I'm going to go back, and so I added another layer of white just to make the bottom part an extra brighter area. So I did the same thing. I added more white to it and blended it back up. So we create kind of another layer of brightness and white in there. Okay, so I'm going to do that to all the clouds. This is another layer of white in there. So dipping my tip of the brush in the white, doing the bottom part and blending it back up again. So you can see how doing the white again a second time has allowed that area to be even brighter. And then if you want, you can bring down this cloud right here, and you're the creator of this storm, so you can decide that you want a cloud to be dipping down lower if you want. And all I did was I dipped my brush back in the blue. It's the blue and the white, and I'm just doing these little rounded strokes, and I'm getting this cloud to dip down a little bit lower here to make it look a little bit more interesting. And then of course I'll do the white little highlight at the bottom, because maybe I will have a lightning strike in this area as well. And so you don't really want to worry about where your lightning is going to strike yet. Just kind of follow the concept of doing the little white highlight on the bottom of all the clouds, because essentially if the lightning's striking close to it, there would be some light there anyway. Okay, and then it blends back up into it. And the same kind of concept with the sky. You don't want to overwork the cloud. You don't want to over blend it, because then it'll all turn the same color and it won't have the pretty light white light on the bottom. Okay, so I'm doing the little white highlight over here. And you are allowed to dip your brush back in the blue. So if you feel like you need some darker areas back in your cloud, you can always do that. And just after doing that, go back with a little bit more white to get it to blend some more. Okay, so that's what I did. There was a little bit more blue on my brush, and you create some darker shadowy areas of the cloud, because wherever we have light, bright light, we have to have a balance of some very dark areas too. Okay. And maybe some parts of the cloud that are toward the top might have a tiny bit of white in them because of the lightning flashing kind of up into the cloud. So you can do that as well. And I'm doing just a little bit more of the dark blue over here on the right. So what I'm doing is really kind of going back and forth, loading my brush in the dark blue and making it more fluffier on the top, and then loading it back in the white and blending a little bit more white to it, and essentially just kind of molding the storm clouds and rendering them. And you can just keep going with this as long as you're not blending them all together. So I'm making this one over here on the left kind of a little bit higher, so it overlaps that shelf cloud at the top a little bit more. And I'm going to stop. You're going to have to find a stopping point for these clouds, because we're going to do the best part of this painting next, is the lightning. And so I highly recommend that you rinse that water out. The lightning is going to be pure titanium white, so we don't want any muddy water mixing in with our titanium white. You want to freshen up your titanium white, so you want to ensure that it is going to be nice and bright and not blue. And my sky, the background sky, is dry by now. The clouds aren't necessarily dry, but that background should be dry. I haven't taken any breaks or anything. And so I'm using a 10-0 liner and dipped in titanium white. This is the very tiny brush. You need that tiny brush to get that very fine point. And I'm going to do the first strike that is hitting the ground. So I'm just kind of let my hand lead the way here. It's kind of a zigzag, not really a zigzag line, just kind of a jagged, sort of long, straight line that kind of jags in a different direction. It is super helpful to look at lightning pictures and observe how the lightning looks in photographs. and really look at the shape of lightning and look at how some lightning strikes are thicker. The lines are thicker because they're closer. Like this line right here that I'm making is going to be the thickest line out of all the other lightning strikes because it's closer in this painting and it's striking the ground, and in fact it's causing kind of a bright light to happen on the bottom where it's touching the land there. So I'm going to make a little bit of a some bright light marks on the bottom here. So you see me doing that, just painting little diagonal lines right there in the bottom. And then perhaps there'd be some light kind of shining in that land. And then in a little bit here, I'll do some more lights on the tree. You'll kind of see what happens with that. But I'm going to continue on with this lightning strike. And we have a lightning strike branch that is branching off and creating this sort of jagged line that branches off, but it's a little thinner than the middle line. And to get the line to look thinner, it's just a matter of holding your brush lightly. So maybe if you want your lightning strike to start out thick at the top where it's starting from the cloud and then get thin as you go down, you would just let go of pressure on the brush. So I start out with heavy pressure and then pressing really hard, and then I press very lightly as I go down and the line kind of fades away. I found that painting lightning strikes, it's very similar to painting branches of a tree, and because of the fact that you're kind of varying the pressure to create a thick and a thin line with branches. And the lightning strikes actually kind of branch out like trees as well. So I did another lightning strike on this cloud, and this one's kind of going straight, and it had a branched arm that went to the left. And maybe I have lightning strikes that are going cloud to cloud. So we have cloud to ground lightning and cloud to air lightning and cloud to cloud lightning. And this one, I actually thought this was really cool up here, getting that lightning sort of spider web thing that lightning strikes do inside the cloud. And I add more to that later. But when you do cloud to cloud, or even any of the lightning strikes, try to get the part where the cloud is touching the lightning to get that to be a little brighter. And then you'll see me go back to this middle strike, and really, because I'm really emphasizing this middle lightning strike, I add several coats and layers to that because I really wanted that middle strike to be nice and bright. So you'll see me go back to it several times, adding another coat to it and another coat to get it to be a little thicker and a little brighter. And that is why. And here's the trees. I was talking about the lights on the trees. So there would be reflection, the highlight on the trees, and I'm just doing these little tick marks over only on the left side, not both left and right side, but only on the left side of the tree, because the lightning is striking. It's casting light everywhere. And same thing with this tree over here. And we would just do just a little bit of light. We don't want to make it look like there's snow on the tree. I hope I didn't make it look like there's snow on the tree. That was not the intention. The intention was to show light reflected, because at this moment of time that this painting is taking place in is the lightning striking and making the whole world look blue just for a second. Okay, and I'm going to go back to this spider web lightning strike up in the cloud, because I really like this idea of the cloud to cloud, but it's going from a lower cloud to an upper cloud, and it looks really cool. And you can just kind of keep adding on to that concept. And I found doing this painting so therapeutic. I mean, I really kind of zenned out. This is a voiceover, by the way. It's not me live painting. I'm talking about my painting as I'm watching the video. But it was really a zen sort of moment. Like, I didn't really think too hard about how my lightning was looking. I did a lot of observations prior to this painting on looking at lightning photographs and just kind of observing how that line of the lightning looks and how the line gets thicker and thinner and varies in the shape. So that really is helpful. But once you kind of grasp the concept, you can really zen out during this stage of the painting. Okay. So I didn't mention this in the written part of the tutorial, but I did use the white paint pen for some of the strikes. And I don't recommend using this for all the strikes because the white on this paint pen does not show up as bright as titanium white. But it helps create this sort of faded look in the lightning. So a very thin line and a very controlled line, because you can control the paint pen, but you also get a lighter white, which was helpful in adding the variety in the lightning. So that's what I'm doing here. This is just the Posca paint pen. I've yet to find a paint pen that's as bright as titanium white. I mean, I think titanium white is as bright as you get with it as far as white goes, but this pen actually is pretty helpful in doing these fine details when you need some white. And that's what I'm doing here. Maybe just a few up in the clouds. Add more to my little spider web lightning up here in the clouds. And really the rest of this painting is just going in with your lightning and adding as many detailed lines as possible. And you can at some point decide to stop and control your thunderstorm and make it no more lightning strikes. But I did something else with the clouds here, and I am going to demonstrate that here in just a second. I grabbed my cloud brush and I'm gonna kind of tame this spider web thing going on, because at the time I thought it was a little much, and looking back I actually thought it was kind of cool, so I tamed that a little bit. So you could do the same if you kind of overdid it with your cloud lightnings. You could always go back and just paint over it, but I wanted to add a few more brighter spots in the cloud, like right there where the spiderweb lightning starts, and just a few more brighter white spots, especially right where the lightning touches the cloud. So I want to make sure that's nice and bright right there. And of course you got to blend it back up into the cloud as well. So grab your blue if you need it. That blue of the cloud should be dry already. So I didn't go back in there and render it too much. So I ended up dipping my brush back in the blue, just kind of blended it just a little bit. Don't want to get too crazy at this point because my painting is pretty much coming to its conclusion. And so that you see me adding that another layer of white right there in that middle part. The focus of that painting is that nice big strike of lightning. And so yes, this painting is coming to its conclusion. I hope that you enjoyed painting this lightning acrylic painting. I say that every painting is probably my favorite, and that's probably true to some point, but this is actually one of my favorites, one of my tops, because I had I'm doing a more bright lights right there in the water, just to kind of emphasize that part, because the lightning striking, of course it would be really bright right there in the water. So that's what I did, and add just a few more little bit of white in the mountain there. But anyway, I was talking about this painting, how it was such a kind of a special painting for me because I have a love of storms and thunder and lightning. So this was very therapeutic to be able to paint my own storm, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.